Hot Button.
Copies of Counter-Strike.
How did you find customers for that?
Dude, everybody wants pixie sticks. Like it's like gum. Once somebody's eating a pixie stick, where'd you get that? I'll hook you up. My plug. Pixie stick plug.
Hello, and this is episode 0 of Hot Button, a podcast
Hell yeah.
about all things weird that have happened in the world of games, each episode diving deep into a different topic from some point in video game history, from significant controversies to total business failures, and hopefully everything interesting in between.
Yeah.
I'm Randall Beatrice, and I am here with Austin Blakesley and Chris Anantuano.
Hey, what's up, fam?
And today we're going to talk about 38 Studios, an IP company founded and run by former MLB baseball player Curt Schilling, who famously pitched for the Philadelphia Phillies, even helping to lead them to the 1993 World Series, as well as for the Arizona Drawbacks and Boston Red Sox, before retaring and attempting to jump headfirst into the thankless and competitive world of video game development, which later unfortunately ended with the involvement of both the FBI and the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, but not before producing and releasing cult RPG favorite Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning, a game now bizarrely owned by the state of Rhode Island.
Yeah, hell yeah.
And this is the full story.
Hell yeah.
So apparently, from what I could find, it said that this idea for him to want to start a game company all began in December of 2005. Right. He was at a family gathering with his wife's uncle. It was a dude named Bill Thomas, a retired business executive. And he pitched this idea of starting a video game company to focus on building a brand new MMORPG. A genre which he enjoyed playing. He frequently played and enjoyed. He was apparently a big fan of WoW, and
that's
also
what I heard.
wanted to chase
Also
that pretty much
EverQuest.
forever. And EverQuest.
Because WoW came out, I want to say, about a year before he made this decision.
Yeah. How old is EverQuest exactly?
Oh, God.
Older.
90s?
Really?
Yeah,
that
one
old?
is.
The first
two
one
came out. Yeah, a little.
Yeah, now that you're thinking, I picture like old school box art. It's like
of
this
EverQuest Online.
Yeah, like it might as well be like a fantasy love novel.
Yeah,
like
totally.
All that
That is kind of what it looks
I think
like.
EverQuest 2 came out around the same time as WoW.
I think that was 2003.
Yeah.
Right? It was like they beat them just by a little bit.
WoW beat the crap out of them. But
Also, when
EverQuest
we were
1
first
was
looking at
super
this, when
popular.
he was like, and I didn't know he was a former business executive, I picture him approaching his like wife's uncle. Like I pictured like the vacation, like his fucking uncle, like he's like, hey, I play video games, and he's like backing out of his trailer, like I got a couple bucks.
Well, essentially, that's kind of how this went down. Fast forward to September of 2006, just a little under a year later, and an official press release comes out formally announcing the formation of a company called Green Monster Games. And this was a team consisting of Curt, 6 of his friends, Uncle Tom, and most importantly, author R.A. Salvador, who is best known for penning a bunch of fantasy novels like a Demon Wars saga and the Forgotten Realm stuff. And
I've never read any of that.
Even more interestingly was the comic book creator and artist Todd McFarlane, who at the time was a big get.
Yeah, he must have been huge in that time.
Yeah.
This is long after Spawn and what he did. Didn't he do Batman and Spider-Man?
Or Amazing Spider-Man. Sorry, and he did a bunch of music videos and shit too, which I think he won an award for the Korn one.
He did a Korn music video?
I think he did. I think it was like Freak on a Leash, maybe. But he was like, his artwork helped shape a lot of famous character designs that we still see
for
today.
sure.
Like you were talking about Spider-Man, like I'm pretty sure he was responsible for the first real appearance of Venom.
Really?
Yeah, which is funny because now like that new movie is coming out, and even that's still like taken from his.
And now he's hanging out with
design.
Curt Schilling and his 6 friends.
Well, not anymore, I don't think. There is a quote out there that he mentions like his relationship with Curt.
Okay, this is point number 1, mistake number 1.
Already a mistake.
Here. It's sort of putting the cart before the horse.
Yeah.
You don't hire a bunch of famous people and pay them a shit ton of money before you know what you're doing.
Yeah.
This
It's
is
like-
definitely something rich people do.
Yeah.
Yes,
this is
it's something
exactly-
ritual. Well, they were thrilled to get the
Yeah, well,
like,
yeah.
to hear
R.A.
that they're gonna be
Salvatore and Tom
joining the company.
McFarlane probably saw fucking dollar signs and
Oh,
agreed
for
to be
sure.
on it.
Absolutely.
But you like they're busy people, and they're
Yeah.
not gonna stay all the whole time. And I'm sure their job was more like a producer,
Well, here's
where
the
lower
like,
people made
exactly,
a bunch of art
yeah.
and stories, and then they just came in one day every week, and we're just like, it looks good to me.
yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Well, with the exception of Curt and Tommy, like none of these guys were completely strangers to games. So their first CEO was a dude named Brett Close, who he worked on some stuff related to World of Warcraft. And that's I'm pretty sure how he befriended Curt. And then their first,
'cause if you got money, you could just talk
exactly,
to anybody.
Yeah, and so their first CTO was a dude named John Lav, and he came from EA. He came from Electronic Arts, who later went on to actually publish Kings of Amalur. But like,
I'm curious who these other 6 people are.
I know.
Are
I
these
don't
the other
know.
6 people?
No, these aren't, because those were dudes that came in like shortly after. Like the only significant people from that original 6 were R.A. Salvatore and Tom McFarlane.
So there's obviously some members of his entourage in here. Like,
yeah, like and I can only imagine. I just assume they're all frat boy jock. Like,
Yeah.
but like it's the R.A. Salvatore wrote. He wrote the story for some Forgotten Realms video games. There's specifically one called Demon Stone, which I think was nominated for like a BAFTA, and I haven't played it, but he contributed to games like EverQuest. He wrote bot dialogue for Quake 3, which I don't know how that's a job, I guess, but voice acting was a big deal in games back then.
Yeah, for sure.
And Tom McFarlane, he's pretty heavily credited on a few different releases, mostly Spawn games, which weren't really great. And then this other game that he was billed #1 on called McFarlane's Evil Prophecy. Did you ever play that?
No.
It
You
is
put
an
his name in
awful
front of it?
PS2 game.
Like he's trying to
they
be Tom
did, yeah.
Clancy?
It's called McFarlane, and the artwork was fine. I assume like what he did was fine, but it was not great.
Yeah, you're right. There's never been a Spawn game that's been good, probably.
No, the Spawn's best
That's 'cause
appearance
they
in
made
video
God of
games
War
was in the
instead.
Xbox version of Soul Calibur 2, which is the worst version of that game because the GameCube one had Link in it, and I think the PS2 one had
Which
dude from Tekken.
this is all rich people
Yeah.
thinking going on, because it's like it's a smart idea to hire a famous artist and a famous writer
Of
to
course.
build all the lore behind your giant MMO.
Yeah.
But you need a proof of concept before you do this shit.
Yeah.
Right? And also, like, another rich people thing to do is, like, why don't I hire a CEO and a CTO and a COO, and then they'll hire all the important
Yeah.
people? And it's like...
You don't need programmers.
It's almost like a baseball player is
Yeah.
hiring somebody to build a game company for him.
in theory, not a bad idea. But
So here's the funny thing is like regardless that there was no real pitch yet for any one product, that company was in full force. Like they leased a 30,000 square foot office in Maynard, Massachusetts, and this was by the historic clock tower. And shortly after this, the company changed their name from Green Monster Games to 38 Studios.
He said that Green Monster Games wasn't about the Green Monster wall at Boston.
He's such a
What a
liar.
fucking liar. Like,
did he,
what
did he
else could it
also
come
say
from?
that 38 was not based on his fucking
I'm-
number
I'm-
that he pitched for?
I'm curious if
that was his
if
number
there was
in the
any
MLB.
legal shit there.
Yeah.
Because the Green Monster is a trademark name.
Exactly.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that does make
Well,
sense.
this is
Yeah.
appealing to game fans. So just to clarify, if you've never watched a game of sports ball in your life, the Green Monster is because in baseball you can just have any shaped stadium you want because fuck rules. They built a giant wall on the side of the field in Boston Stadium, and it's called the Green Monster. He played there for years. There's no way he didn't like. consistently use that name.
No, it's coincidence. Well, that's
No,
it.
I'm talking
So,
about another Green Monster.
Did he 38 was that the number he played for under the Red Sox or the Phillies?
All
I'm
of
not
them.
sure.
Oh, for all of them.
Yeah, okay, so that was.
I
his
believe.
I don't know a lot about baseball. Do you get to keep your
Yes.
number?
Yeah.
Really?
If
If
you're
you're
good enough.
if you're important enough,
All right.
you part of your trade thing is like I'm wearing the same number.
Yeah.
And then everybody's like,
Which he
fine.
was. He was a
Yeah.
good pitcher.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. That is what I hear.
Yeah.
Now, a studio this size also meant that he had to obviously have an increase in staff from this original 6.
Yeah. Yeah, not just Jeff,
just
Tom,
fucking- yeah.
Enos. Gilbert, whoever the fuck
These
is
aren't
in his entourage.
these aren't Boston names at all.
But
But
Donnie.
in 2008, Travis McGethy joined the team, and he was a former lead designer for Sony Online Entertainment's EverQuest, which is, like you guys said earlier, another game that he was like, he wanted
really
to chase.
into.
Like he had.
Yeah.
But they were super dedicated to this MMO goal at the time. That's all he
Of course,
wanted.
who
to
wouldn't be? You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
That two things. Number one, Massachusetts, great place for games, and that'll come up later.
Okay.
Forming a studio. He formed a studio
is
in
there.
Boston because he fucking lives in Boston.
Yeah,
he has
exactly.
a mansion
I,
in
is that,
Boston.
I assume that's where he's from. Like,
I'm not sure if he's
Don't
from
know.
Boston, but no, he definitely.
Well,
I think
I guess
that's
he
where he was
played for the
playing at
Phillies
the
and stuff
time. Yeah.
first.
He was most famous for being on the Red Sox, I believe, and he has a mansion in Boston. So he
Yeah,
was
of
like,
course.
I don't want a long commute, so he formed a studio in Boston. There's a lot of good studios in Boston.
Yeah.
As we know.
yes.
I can't see where he's from, but he definitely he played in Arizona for high school. I don't know. He played for the Orioles like way back too.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
we have
geez,
a
I
nice
didn't even
little
find that.
hateful memory of him as well. So.
But
But,
they
other thing, hiring Travis McGethy,
yeah.
another good move on his part, because when you hire people, theoretically, when you hire people for a game studio, if you hire the lead at somewhere like Sony Online Entertainment who made EverQuest,
Yeah.
he can theoretically, if he was a good boss,
Yeah.
he can theoretically bring a bunch of people with him.
We bring people with him. Exactly.
Yeah.
Right,
He-
yeah.
Oh, I know people that I worked with on EverQuest that I can bring
So
along with me.
other
Yeah.
than the other thing of like, let me hire some random CEOs and CTOs first, like hiring a lead designer with some talent behind him, some
Yeah.
proof, will inevitably bring people with him.
Yeah.
Now I assume like he's like going around acting like being like, I got this guy and I got this guy and I got this
Well, that-
guy.
yeah,
and
that's the whole
Yeah,
point.
yeah. Do you think it was him, or do you think it was one of his entourage? Like he
I don't
shifted
know,
it to
yeah.
Donnie. Like, hey, Donnie, call some
Well, that's-
CTOs.
Well, that's what you mentioned.
Hey,
Those
my
6
boss is
people.
trying to start
Like,
a game company. You
I
want to get down
don't-
here?
I can't for the life of me. I don't know what any of those dudes did. Like as far as they know, they were
Nothing.
just like yes men that followed him around and like.
Yeah, for sure. What's better than like 6 other dudes to stand behind you and just be like, yeah, let's fucking make a game company, yeah, guy.
No, so that's the crazy thing. I found that information out later. Is that like that's how quickly this came to be? He told his friends of his over like fucking like Skype that he's like, I'm gonna start a game company. Like that. Like there was no other real like research into that other than like he's like, I like games. I can do this. I
Yeah.
have money.
This is what it must be like to have
Yeah,
money.
I know, right? And but this is where it gets really weird because a year later, 38 Studios acquired Big Huge Games.
But how did he become 38? Did he just changed it?
So they changed the name from Green Monster Games to 38 Studios.
Obviously, because he named it after the wall.
when they opened, their first studio.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You probably got a cease and desist
Yeah,
from
I'm sure.
fucking Fenway Park.
They Big Huge Games. They've been around developing since like 2000. So like mostly strategy games, but they managed to find quite the audience in that niche. They made like the Rise of Nations stuff, and I think they worked on an Age of Empires 3 expansion. But actually, the only game that I'm familiar with that they made an XBLA version of Settlers of Catan. Which
okay,
it was
okay,
actually
yeah.
pretty decent, and you can't download it anymore. And I don't know if that's like how long they own the license for or whatever. But
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah, a little board game business for you.
Yeah.
Catan recently got bought.
oh
Really?
really?
By who?
I wonder if that got taken down.
Asmodee Games.
Who owned it originally? Was it just them? Like they were just. some
I
people?
forget.
I think Carcassonne got bought
Wayfair
at some point too.
That's another company. Something fair.
Yeah.
But these Rise of Nations games like scored pretty well on like Metacritic and stuff like that. But again, these were like legitimate dudes making legitimate games at the studio now. Like when they acquired like I assume they acquired this team because they needed actual programmers and engineers who like know what they're doing. But at this point their studio was like getting like significant get after significant get. So at this point they had a dude named Ken Ralston who he worked really heavily on the design of Morrowind and Oblivion. So it was like
Who was this? Just another guy coming in?
yeah, and this was another guy coming in when they like I don't know if he did work previously with Big Huge.
He worked. He was hired by Big Huge to work on a then untitled RPG.
Okay, and
Because he was big talent.
Now, did Grant
from
Kirkhope
Bethesda.
come from there as well?
Gotcha.
No, Grant Kirkhope
Came in later.
he came in separate because he never worked with Bethesda.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he was like
These are people Big Huge
The other
picked up
big
to
guy.
make a game.
Yeah. So I don't know if you know Grant Kirkhope, but like he's.
Could you imagine being this guy though? First of all, like you're just getting hired by some Big Huge games company, with no idea that they were hired by some company owned by some fucking idiot
Yeah,
who decided
exactly.
to make a game with
Well,
six
that's
of his
like from
friends.
their perspective,
at the time when what's his Ken Ralston, was that his name?
Yeah, Ken Ralston.
He was hired before Big Huge was acquired by 38.
Okay.
So he was hired when THQ was publishing this then unannounced,
wow.
unnamed RPG.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, that was the. So THQ also plays a weirdly big role in this. So like, so Grant Kirkhope was the other dude who came in. He was going to be an audio director for them, and he composed a bunch of like some of the most memorable game scores. Like he worked with Nintendo for a long time, and he composed the Banjo-Kazooie games,
Nice.
Donkey Kong Country stuff. He did. The later Donkey Kong Countries, I guess, the more recent ones. But he also composed GoldenEye and Perfect Dark. And
Perfect Dark, great
those scores
soundtrack.
are fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But could you imagine Kings of Amalur with the Donkey Kong Country soundtrack?
So like this was a pretty dope team, and this
Yeah.
because I'm pretty sure Grant Kirkhope is not only a composer but he's like also like a sound engineer.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like so here's the weird thing. Like Big Huge Games at the time, you mentioned THQ, like they were on the verge of closure by them already. Like,
THQ was?
no, well, THQ was facing their own economic troubles,
'cause
but
there's
they
a story
owned,
there.
yeah, and that's a whole separate thing. You talk about the U-Draw tag.
they owned Big Huge
They
Games.
owned Big Huge, yeah.
Who was making was making a big RPG, and when you are a company that is struggling and you are making a bunch of kids games that cost like $10 to make, and one game for adults that costs $100 million to make,
Yeah.
the first thing that you cut is the one for adults.
all your movie tie-ins in between releases of Saints Row and
Exactly.
yeah, and
So the THQ was about ready to cut
yes,
this project.
which is funny. They only owned Big Huge Games for about a year.
Okay.
Like and I don't know if they released anything under their banner. I don't think they did. But at this point, like, they said that Big Huge Games would be shut down unless an outside buyer would like be interested in them in 60 days.
Really?
Yeah,
Quick.
that's how. Yeah, and here's the funny thing: is like less than a month later, 38 Studios like came into the rescue. Like it's like which is the like so it's like at this point like everything seems like it's in like such good faith.
Yeah,
Like,
they're like, oh, the game company's going out of business. Let's
yeah,
scoop
like
these guys up.
like scoop them up, and they're good dudes.
Yeah,
And-
meanwhile, yeah, Curt Schilling's like, it's like the minor leagues, you know? We go in and scoop up a couple guys, and maybe they'll pan out. And everybody's like, no, we're talking about video games.
I assume he only spoke in those metaphors. So when they acquired them, they kept 70 of the 120 people or so that was working on it, which is like kind of uncommon. If you like buy out a studio, like they tried their best to keep everybody that they could.
That's pretty cool. And I'm 100% sure, though, that they probably did this just because they didn't have the staff yet. They
Yeah.
were like, we need to keep as many of these people as possible because we need a staff.
Yeah.
Like, at this point, it's just a bunch of rich fucking idiots and
Exactly.
and Donnie
Yeah. So,
from
yeah,
down
at
the
this
street.
point,
You know what I mean?
smart move again because
They're just spending money, but
they could have acquired Big Huge and turned what would later become Kingdoms of Amalur Reckoning into their MMO.
Yeah.
But instead, they just decided to let them put out their game as like a prequel.
yeah.
But like theoretically, it's a good move to snap up an entire company because then you don't have to hire a staff.
Exactly.
You don't have to have
Yeah.
the know-how
come with a staff.
You don't have to have the know-how to find a lead programmer
That's
and a lead
true.
art director and all that shit. You're just like you're working on my game now. Get to it. You know?
They also replaced their old CEO, that Brett Close guy, with a chick named Jen McLean, and she was the former SVP of business development at the time.
A big, huge?
No, of 38.
Oh,
like
okay,
like
okay,
so
okay.
she like they like she was.
Oh,
working
so they got rid of Big Huge as CEO.
I
yeah.
don't know.
No, okay.
No, they got rid of their own CEO.
They got
okay,
rid of their
okay,
own
okay,
CEO, but I don't know where the CEO of Big Huge went.
Yeah,
at
he
this
probably
point.
talked some shit on Boston or something. They were like, get the fuck
You know,
out of here.
baked beans and Dunkin' Donuts not that great.
And then all the relationships are all
Get
severed.
the fuck out!
So here's what gets really interesting, and this is the weird. So this is now in July of 2010. So they've had like a couple years to try and figure out what the hell they're
what were they
really
doing for years?
Twiddling their thumbs and like building assets, I guess. I assume like MMO development is like such a long, like they're just building outlines and talking to investors, but like at this point,
some guy comes up like, "Hey, I built a monster," and then Curt
We'll use
Schilling's
that
entourage guy, Donnie's like, "Why doesn't he have a baseball bat? I thought this was." He's like, "No, get out of here."
So the Rhode Island Economics Development Corporation is a mouthful. They were a board of like 13 members, and all these dudes were like super high. Again, like we're talking, you mentioned like rich people drama. This is like, it's amazing. Like one of the dudes on this board was the chairman and former CEO of Hasbro Toys, and then they had the vice chairman of Gilbane Real Estate, which is like one of the biggest like real estate at the time in the country.
If you've never heard of it, there's something sketchy.
There's something sketchy about it?
There's all sorts of oil companies and all sorts of weird holdings
let me
that
ask
you've
you
never
this.
heard of.
Have
and
you
have all the power.
have you heard of Vibeco?
No.
Okay.
I have.
They're apparently one of the country's main manufacturers of industrial vibrators, and they are also on the board.
What's an
Earned the
industrial
spot.
vibrator?
I don't know. That's what it right.
Is that like a commercial vibrator?
So that was from the New York.
You can only buy
Times
this from
expose.
like an industrial
Yeah. warehouse.
Like he's on for the regular people.
It's only for business use.
You need a license for it.
business vibrator.
Now they approved a 70.
Actually, I hear now Elon Musk is building a giant vibrator to dig a hole in the ground. Maybe he's interested.
Isn't that like the thing from Austin Powers? It's like the big drill dick thing. But they got approved a $75 million loan, which I think was the biggest at the time in that state. I don't know
you're
for a
telling
fact.
me
Like
a bunch of bored rich people.
Yeah.
We're just like, what to spend money on next?
I assume they all look like the Monopoly guy, but this was to guarantee that 38 Studios in exchange would bring at least 450 jobs by the end of 2012.
Which, even for an MMO, a lot of fucking people.
That is a lot of people.
450.
That's a
yeah,
big
I thought
team.
that too when I was reading.
That's
this.
a big team.
450 is a lot of fucking people.
Yeah.
When was this? 2010, you said?
This was
2010.
This was 2010, and they wanted to have at least 450 jobs by the end of 2012.
So what company has 450 employees even nowadays? That's a game company. Like
For games,
I'm sure bigger
Ubisoft.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure
there are
it was
probably
like
and
thousands
stuff.
of
Yeah,
employees.
there are probably like
Not startups
2,500
though. Like that's
There are probably
Well, this
2,500 people that have
this
their
kind
hands.
of leads into the fact that they wanted to be something fucking
huge. So that's the
You
funny
know what
thing.
I mean?
Like, and I'll get to that because this dude
Yeah.
was talking so much shit. It's like amazing. So Rhode Island at the time was apparently on the precipice of like economic ruin, and I didn't know this until I like dove deep into it. But like they had employment rates as high as like 12%, which were like
I saw
fourth worst
this.
in the nation, which is
was-
crazy because that state's not that big.
Yes,
But-
Rhode Island's small. Have you ever been to Rhode Island?
Yeah.
I've been to Rhode Island once. It's all like little
drive through
islands
it.
and people's on boats.
Yeah,
on boats.
we drive through it to go to like Boston and stuff like
So
that.
what's
and-
the industry in Rhode Island?
I don't know.
How do you become unemployed in
this
Rhode
was
Island?
Not video
Not
games.
video
Not
games.
video
Yeah.
games,
So this
yeah.
was a risky move that would
The fish,
later
they're all
sink
drying
them.
up. I don't know what Rhode Island accent sounds like.
Yeah, it's all clams, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a more bored Boston accent.
yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, we're running out of clams, so I guess we gotta fire some people.
No, this is where it gets hilarious. So I'm gonna butcher this name, but like, so Curt had a meeting with the then governor at the time, and this dude named Don Carcieri.
Carcieri? Maybe.
That seems right.
There's no way he's not a New York mobster.
And this was well, that's funny because all this is going to read like that. So he met up with him about investing in his video game company, a business minded that he did not understand literally at all. Like I wish I could find those quotes, but it's like hearing your dad talk about video games.
He's like, oh, you like Curt Schilling comes to him like, yeah, but I got an idea for a video game company. He's like, yeah, well, it's like the pongs and stuff. All right, like two things moving, bouncing a ball. I know it. Yeah, I know what the game
So
was.
you're not that far off, but like they sold so he was like this sounded like a really mutually beneficial scheme to him because I think like I don't know if this was at all tied to like any re-election stuff, but he was basically like.
If it involves a governor, of course it does.
Yeah, but he's promising that this dude's gonna make a lot of money and that he's gonna get a bunch of jobs. Which seems like the easiest
Yeah,
way
I
to
don't know how
convince
many
any governor to do anything.
Yeah. I don't know how many people it takes to make one block hit a ball into another block, but if you say you need 450 and $75 million, go ahead.
So I think the deal actually went through in November that year, and this is in 2012. And 38 Studios announced the closure of that $75 million financing package in conjunction with the EDC on the account of the relocation of their whole studio to pick up and move it from the Maynard studio in Boston to One Empire Plaza in Providence, Rhode Island, which was just a couple blocks away from the Capitol.
Okay, so they had to move they had to dig up the whole studio from Boston, say goodbye to Beans, push it all to Rhode Island.
Beans.
Get a bunch of clams.
Yeah,
No, sorry.
Say,
So
there's not
this
too
was,
much
I think this
change
was
in the
this
chowder.
deal was more. This was in 2010 because by the first quarter of 2011, that was supposed to be when this whole move was completed.
Yeah.
And which is actually not a lot of time.
To move.
Yeah.
What? What did you say? They kept 70 some odd of employees. I'm assuming they moved. They were in Boston at the time, or either around the country or something like that.
No, Big Huge isn't they didn't have to relocate. So this was just 38. But at this point, they hired 160 new employees. And they made it super enticing to get new people to join that company. They literally assumed responsibility for the mortgages on dozens of these people's homes until they could be sold. That incentive
List of companies that don't do that.
Yeah.
Apple, Google, Facebook.
Go down the list.
Yeah.
Holy shit, that's impressive. I mean,
and so people were flocking. People wanted to be a part of that company. Yeah,
hey,
that's a great deal.
It's a great
Come
fucking
to
deal.
Rhode Island. All you gotta do is scrape the barnacles off your pier every once in a while, and it's a beautiful place to live. Why would you not go?
Yeah, it was a done deal. And by April, it seems like things were going in the right direction for the job creation and relocation milestones. All while convinced that a bunch of other local politicians that he was going to build this fucking empire, this Microsoft tech behemoth of a company. Because he was going around in interviews at the time saying that they were going to get Bill Gates rich, quote unquote,
which is so good.
It's brilliant.
Because I'm thinking of it like this: the more it kind of just finally clicked to me.
People
the
wised
idea
up
that they're
since
just there's definitely these 12 rich people, this Hasbro guy and these fucking vibrator dude and the fucking mayor, and they're all sitting around have you heard of technology? So basically, they come here. There's the Californias and the East Coast. And they build these huge empires. They have no idea that there's nothing to do with technological advances. They're making a fucking MMO.
Yeah, but at this point, WoW was huge, and that was something he was pretty much going around
WoW
telling
wasn't
people to make
Microsoft huge.
No, of course not. Yeah, nothing was. So it's funny. He let it be known here at this point that nobody was trying to swindle anyone.
No, I don't think so. I think they were all stupid.
They were stupid. It was just this overconfidence, and they really believed in it.
Dude, it's unbelievable.
The cockiness is insane.
Just the idea that they think that there's some Apple or Microsoft level corporation when they're just making a video game. It's I picture the mayor coming in and be all right, let's see what we're working on, and it's just there's just a 3D image of a guy with a sword walking on a fucking platform, and then he's yeah, okay, well where's the cell phone? You guys make cell phones.
Well, how do you convince old people that video game development is you all you do is name drop the companies that they do know?
Yes,
you say we're gonna chase Microsoft money and Apple money because they've heard of them.
Yeah. I know Bill Gates.
Yeah, because he wasn't going around saying we're gonna make Blizzard money. Because they fucking don't know.
So,
exactly. I don't get it. You lose money in a blizzard. What do you mean?
Couple points to make here.
Yeah.
Okay. Number one, $75 million loan to a bunch of rich people sounds great.
Yeah, it sounds like
That's not
chump change.
that much money when you're in the vibrator / real estate business. But to people who don't know anything about video games, $75 million loan, not enough to make an MMO.
An MMO.
Yeah.
Especially
even at that time.
when you consider the fact that most studios that built MMOs
Yeah.
had an office and were not paying the mortgages for their employees.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to play a little game.
All
I
right.
have a list here of the most expensive MMOs ever developed.
Holy shit.
And we're going to go around the table. Everybody give me their best guess for the most expensive MMO ever
Most
developed.
expensive. I don't know many MMOs. I don't
There were a lot.
waste my time. Sorry. Is Destiny technically count as an MMO?
Destiny is up there.
It's got to be up
It's
there.
not number one.
No. Okay.
So I was gonna guess Final Fantasy 14 just because they relaunched that whole
Yo,
thing.
true,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And I don't know like how much that cost.
And that took
but-
forever.
Yeah.
Still not up there.
Still
Oh,
not
really?
number one.
Okay, so
It
let's
can't- wait.
let's go
Well,
through this.
We were talking about Guild Wars 2.
Pure
earlier.
development, though, right? Not
Yeah,
like
we're talking pure development.
Obviously, WoW has a
Destiny-
lot of server costs. And
Destiny is one of the most expensive games ever developed.
Yeah, period.
With an
yeah.
estimated budget of about $500 million.
Jesus
But
Christ. That was a lot of
That
marketing.
includes marketing.
Yeah.
Okay.
So to give you some insight,
Which, just so
Desti-
you know, Destiny 2 is 80% marketing, 20%
Yes.
gameplay.
which Destiny 1 not far behind. The estimated development budget of Destiny is $140 million.
Okay, yeah.
So $360 million of
In-
that game's $500 million
marketing.
budget was
That's
marketing.
more than 75.
That's absurd.
yeah.
So that is
They made an event
to
out of
give you
that.
to give you a little example. Destiny's number 3 on this list.
Destiny's number 3?
So who's above that? So we're talking
and Final
500 million
Fantasy
plus.
14 is number 4 with a development cost of $65 million for the first round and another
Okay.
$65 million for Realm Reborn.
Jesus.
So a
Did
total of
they-
$130
Did they ever
million.
make a Leisure Suit Larry MMO?
No.
Okay. I imagine that would be up there.
Okay. So it's a tie for the
Okay.
most expensive
All right.
MMO ever developed.
Wait, who's number 2 first?
Well,
Start from the
no,
bottom.
Okay, I got you,
technically,
got you,
with
got
the
you.
tie, Destiny is number 2.
Okay.
At 140 million. Number 1
Does that make
is a
World of
two-way
Warcraft?
a two-way tie for 200 million between the Old Republic
Oh, shit. I completely forgot
yeah.
about
and
that.
Elder Scrolls Online.
Yeah.
Wow, really?
Yeah,
The
Okay.
old, the Old
There's
Republic
so much in ESO.
the
I
Old
guess,
Republic
yeah.
is reported
I knew about the Old Republic. though.
reported at 200 million. Elder Scrolls is estimated at 200 million. So
Okay.
technically
they don't have to disclose all that.
yeah, technically
Which means they spent more.
The Old
Probably.
The Old Republic is
yeah.
the highest reported MMO
Yeah.
budget of all
When
time.
they showed Old Republic at E3 and stuff, that
Do
game
you
had
remember the
production
trailer
value.
of the two, like, it's like
Yeah.
the Sith Lords and the people, like,
Too bad
they
that
jump
game
and they're
is not
clashing.
that at all.
No, it's nothing
Like,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
like, yeah.
It's
All
total
right.
garbage.
some other examples. We have
This is all above a $75 million budget.
Yeah, we're talking.
some of them. Firefall, which you probably haven't heard of. No, I have,
I
but
have, but I
it
haven't
failed
played it.
pretty bad. 100 million.
That's coming from me. I played Star Wars Galaxies and The Matrix Online.
Tabula Rasa.
I've heard of that. What does that sound
100
familiar?
million. It was
Nobody knows about that.
It was,
$100
designed,
million.
it was designed by Richard Garriott, the
Okay.
guy that designed Ultima Online. It was like his
Okay.
big branch into like 3D MMOs.
Where's
and it
Warframe
failed.
on here? Is there somewhere?
Warframe is not technically an MMO.
Oh.
I don't think.
okay.
There was a canceled, never released Halo MMO with an estimated budget of about 90 million. That was
Wow.
developed by Ensemble Studios,
Yeah,
owned by
I didn't know
Microsoft.
they got that far.
So Microsoft couldn't even make an MMO for 75 million.
the
even though
company
they're
that he
Yeah, the
claiming
company that
like,
he
even though they're
Like-
Bill Gates rich. We have Defiance, that sci-fi show MMO
Yeah,
they
yeah,
made.
yeah.
That was 80 million. We have Rift, which was estimated at 70 million.
Rift.
Then we have World of Warcraft, which
wow,
is
that's
way
low
down
on
the
the
list.
list.
65 million.
Dude,
for
they
World
A
of
nailed
game
Warcraft.
that's still being supported.
Dude, they
Yeah.
nailed it. Blizzard might be the greatest game company on earth as far as
There
just,
are
like,
some-
knowing what the
budgeting
fuck
goes.
they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They really do know what they're
Titan,
doing.
which eventually became
Became
Overwatch,
Overwatch, yeah.
is estimated to have cost somewhere between 50 to 70 million before it was canceled and turned into Overwatch.
Well, at least we know that they made that back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And exactly, Overwatch returned.
Yeah.
Another one that's still going, DC Universe Online.
Is that still going?
50 million budget.
Yeah, that's news to me.
50 million. So they want to make Microsoft money off of an MMO that's going to cost only 25 million more
Well,
than,
so-
than that game.
So theoretically, 75 million from an MMO is possible if you budget well, which we will learn soon.
But they did
that they did not know how to do that.
Yeah, why not? When you're
But-
paying Donnie $80 million in beans on his monthly fucking budget.
But when you let artists create without any business intervention, which we will also learn, bad idea, they tend to get a little exorbitant. That's kind of what happened with Elder Scrolls and Star Wars. They're just like, we have we're making a Skyrim MMO. Do whatever the fuck you want. Spend as much money as possible because we're going to be rolling in it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then the same thing happened. They're like, we have the Star Wars license. Do whatever the fuck you want. And then it cost $250 million. Which apparently they both
Wait a second. Don't do anything you want.
They both made their money back, apparently.
Well, I mean, Old Republic went free to play.
Yeah, and
But it apparently rolls in about $100 million a year.
Yeah, there's,
Really?
there's microtransactions, and I think it actually, my buddy actually started playing it later in its life cycle, and he said it was pretty good. Like, apparently,
They've
like,
done a lot.
somebody-
They've done a lot.
I mean,
They've
like,
done a
that's
lot
the thing
to-
about
yeah.
MMOs. Like, you can turn them around.
They've done a lot to both of those games.
Okay.
They were
and
not
Elder
good
Scrolls
launches, but there are people that play
got,
them.
like, Elder Scrolls, similar to Final Fantasy, had, like, relaunches. Not as dramatic, but, like, when they ported those over to Xbox One and PS4, they, like, apparently did a lot of shit.
Point number 2. Rhode Island, not a great place to develop games.
What is that?
This is not an uncommon practice. There are a lot of cities that offer arts grants. You'll see a lot of movies that take place in New York City, quote unquote, are actually filmed in places like Toronto and Vancouver. There are a lot of video game studios in Montreal.
Yes.
There are a lot of video game studios in Texas. There are obviously a lot of video game studios in California. A lot of states and provinces, in Canadian terms, have arts grants.
yeah.
So they will help fund studios with the intention of those studios getting big, and then eventually people come in and form smaller studios, poach talent from the big studios. Like in the example of Montreal, Ubisoft moved to Montreal. Ubisoft obviously got real big.
Yeah.
Then you had people like WB and Eidos, later Square Enix, moved to Montreal. They poached a lot of talent. Now you have a bunch of indie studios setting up in Montreal because it's not.
It's a great way for a city to increase the population, increase the money that's coming into the studio.
Now, is that what they were trying to do? Was to make Rhode Island a
Yes,
tech?
but
Yeah, and why wouldn't you think that when you got fucking some baseball player and saying we're gonna have the new Microsoft here in fucking Rhode
Well,
Island?
here's the
You
funny
know
thing
what I
is,
mean?
like, from what I researched, like, I don't even know if he played other games. Like, it sounded like he was just a big fan of MMOs. Like, like, I don't actually know. Like,
Well, the other thing is that, like, a lot of the cities that I named, the way they do it is you don't assume liability when the studio fails. You don't give them a loan, you give them tax breaks.
You give them tax breaks,
Right,
exactly.
right.
That's how a
Which
ton
is
of companies do
What?
business.
Which is like Austin, for example, big game town now, that's where id was formed.
Yeah.
And id was formed there because of tax breaks.
Yeah.
North
Where-
Carolina is starting to get a pretty big video game presence. Epic was formed there.
Yeah.
Epic, now huge, obviously, Fortnite. And
Sorry, what?
Gears
I've
of
never
War,
heard of that.
Unreal Tournament. Fortnite?
PUBG?
Yeah, no. Yeah. Is
All right, let me tell you about Fortnite. No,
that like Roblox? Is that a Roblox mod?
I think it's a real, yeah.
It's like Minecraft.
It's
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
It's for kids. It's
Okay,
fine.
gotcha.
But these are all founded on tax breaks. You're not. The state is not supposed to be the rich person that's gambling all their money.
No,
They're
exactly.
supposed
This is why I think it's some like mobster-esque mob, like a fucking governor that's like
They're supposed to entice rich idiots to spend,
spend their money there, yeah.
And then you just get a bunch of people to move there. And then if the game company fails, you're like, now I have 1,000 more people living in my
telling
state
you,
that need jobs.
The mayor of Rhode Island got drunk on some whiskey one night and watched like 6 Boston baseball games and was like, hey, that's a pitcher, Curt Schilling. And then like all of a sudden he calls him looking for things. Like, hey, I know you from
Well,
television. Let's
here's the
fucking
crazy
bring you
thing is,
in.
like, you're not crazy far off. Like, apparently, like, that governor that he met up with was a fan of baseball. Like, that's why
Yeah,
that
exactly,
meeting
there you
came to
go.
be.
Yeah.
Like, it was like he wasn't a fan of fucking video games. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's like, so here's the crazy thing. So during this time, they were trying to build this MMO, right?
Okay.
That was not the name was not revealed as like what it was.
Yeah.
But development actually split into 2 games. And the first was the game.
Hey, if you can't make one game for $75 million, first thing you should
Make
do,
two.
make 2.
So you mentioned that Kingdoms of Amalur game being like kind of like a prequel. It sort of was. So like Kingdoms of Amalur, once like development went full force on that, like they it was all like that game was always meant to have the scope of a single player hack and slash like action RPG.
That's interesting because it has such an MMO feel.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like by this point, it did, but that wasn't the initial idea. Like what happened was, so this other game, and so Kings of Amalur was published by EA. But what's funny is that the game that was initially pitched to them was a game called Copernicus.
To EA.
Yes,
Okay.
and that was the MMO, and that was so this game was supposed to have that budget of 75 to 100 mil.
Yeah.
And this was to exist in the same universe as Kingdoms of Amalur. This was aligning much more with his original mission to to chase EverQuest in World of Warcraft. So Copernicus never actually saw the light of day, obviously, despite the fact that that was the game being pitched to EA first. And EA was like, whoa, it's like, we didn't, you're a startup, we don't want to publish this huge thing. They came back
There's
with
one
Kingdoms
thing
of
EA
Amalur.
knows how to do is to
Yeah.
not spend money and make a lot of it. So they're instant
It's
right
very
away.
true. So the game was in full production at the Providence studio when the company would later declare bankruptcy. But we'll get back to that because the game devs here were hard at work at both of these projects. Kingdom of Amalur was meant to support this much bigger thing.
Yeah.
Kingdoms of Amalur, to be fair, the reason Kingdoms of Amalur came out was because Kingdoms of Amalur was what I was saying that the other game should have been, which is when Big Huge was bought by 38. THQ had already put a bunch of money into this game. This game had a proof of concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way it didn't already have assets already assigned to it.
This game had assets.
Yeah.
All they did was took a game that already existed and
Built a new
shoved
game
their
out of
name
it.
into it.
Really? That's interesting because I
So,
didn't even know that.
they were just
I
like-
assumed they built it from scratch
I'm sure-
based in this world, but no, you're saying
Yeah.
I'm
that,
sorry,
yeah.
Curt Schilling saw this and was like, this looks like a game that I wanted to make.
Yeah.
So he's like, hey, buddy Todd McFarlane, why don't you, and Ari Salvatore, why don't you go in there, shuffle some things around, try to mess up the art as much as
hit
you
a couple
possibly
foul
can.
balls, and fucking change
So here's
it
the
up.
funny thing is,
Hit a couple pop flies.
EA also didn't want to publish a PC exclusive game at this point. PC gaming isn't what it is today. They wanted a console game.
Yeah.
They're like, yo, you need to scale this thing back so it can come out on 360 and PS3, the consoles that people actually play games on.
Yeah. Well, because
And-
consoles are a huge thing for
Totally,
general
yeah.
population.
Exactly,
Way more
yeah.
accessible than computers. so.
Another interesting point here is that when was this meeting with EA? Do you know? Would that
I'm trying to
it would have
find
had to have been
out.
after 2012, right?
It would, yeah. I mean,
So EA had an MMO because the Old Republic came out in 2011.
wow, is that game that old?
Yeah, so maybe even
So
EA
maybe they didn't want to support
And
two,
they also
rather
spent
than
$1 billion to
that
acquire
game was
BioWare
Yeah.
in order to make the Old Republic.
Yeah.
So maybe they were
So-
kind of like, I'm not interested in doing that shit again.
That probably
You know
played a
what I mean?
huge role.
I'm
sure it
did.
I don't think. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Old Republic came out swinging.
No.
No.
So they were probably pretty spooked at that point.
Which-
They
Surprise.
definitely
And that's Star Wars.
made
Yeah.
their
let
money
alone
back.
a whole new property.
They definitely made their money back, but that was
took
a
time,
very
though.
slow burn.
I think a lot of MMOs
game-
kind of are.
Yeah, that game cost a lot of money up front, and it took a long time.
So here's the crazy thing: they were developing both of these games, and they never got checkups by investors. According to this New York
insane,
Times expose, not a single report was ever filed to look to how much money was being spent. Despite they were going through several $1 million a month, and they never had any advisors come in and
Don
check
needs
the
a new
financial
baseball
health
glove
of
once
the
a
company.
week, so you gotta.
Okay, so
Like-
to insert here,
Yeah.
bad idea bullet point. Again, artists, love them. Creative people, great people.
Not
They need to
business-wise.
be reined in a little bit. And to play,
You're telling me
to play
Peter
the,
Montague was
to play the part of the business guy. We hear a lot of stories about game studios that just all of a sudden shut down, and everybody on the internet freaks out. But it's like the reason that EA, like Chris said, is so good at spending so little money and making so much money is because they're fucking ruthless.
Yeah.
So in video game development, they have what's called milestones.
Okay.
Like Destiny.
No, not like Destiny.
Except you're rewarded for your time and effort.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll say like this game starts and they're like, we're going to come back next month and we need this much concept art done and this much of a story outline done.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like...
Which makes sense. It's fair business practice.
Yeah.
It's a way to control a creative endeavor, but still manage to push it towards...
And then you'll come back and you'll be like, cool, now I need a little bit of a prototype. And then I need more story. And then they'll come back and be like, cool, that's done. And then if they ever come back and they're like, well, we said we were going to get you a prototype, but it's not exactly ready yet. EA or big corporate overlord unnamed X will come in and say, well, why the fuck isn't it done?
Yeah.
And then they're like, I don't want to spend money on people that are just sitting around twiddling their
Meanwhile,
thumbs.
here at 38 Studios, Curt Schilling's like, hey, we're like Google. I put a pizza machine in the office. Anybody want to fucking hang out and get some balls out here?
Yeah.
Like, you know.
I assume he shows up to work every day wearing like the full
sports
picture
uniform.
outfit. Yeah. Just like,
So like, you know, and you have a lot of examples out there of indie studios where it's one guy in his bedroom making a game,
which is why it takes
and
12
they
years to come
they
out.
always turn out great. But yeah, it takes like a decade for one person to make a game.
Yeah.
Because you're in the middle of making a game and you're like, oh, I should have done it this way. Then you go back and rewrite all the code, and then you're
gotta
like,
port it to Switch.
yeah, like it takes so much money and time that you have to have that idiot in the suit cracking the whip sometimes.
Yeah.
And especially in the case of an MMO, because
Oh yeah, I would say
MMOs are
almost
all-
most in the case of an MMO.
yeah,
precisely.
MMOs are all about content. So you could sit there and make an MMO with nobody checking up on you, and it could never come out.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of an MMO is to just make content, so
Over
that
and over.
people playing it never run out of shit to
It's a
do.
platform.
Yeah, exactly.
But eventually, you have to just release it and deal with the people whining, being like, "I played your game for 120 hours straight, and I'm done."
Yeah, what do I do
Is
now?
this bullshit? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, so
Get a job, you hippie.
All right,
That's
so
what
you need to rein those people in.
yeah, no, totally. So let's talk a little bit about Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning, otherwise known as the EA requested scaled down version of Copernicus.
Yeah.
Since, as Austin said, funding online RPGs can be notoriously hard. I actually, other than the demo, I actually did not play this game, so I don't know. I know it's been a few years, but what your memory? You were mentioning this game felt like a single player MMO.
Yeah. Shit, when did this come out again? You said
2012?
2012.
I believe it did come out in 2012.
Which,
I was about to be like, I was a kid. No, I was a well-functioning drunk adult by then.
yeah. My recollection of it is because we talked about Dragon Age.
Yeah. The
Dragon-
lore, like when I'm looking through like the lore and the names, like the Fey lands and all that shit,
Yeah.
it just kind of reminds me of a Dragon Age.
like
vibe.
like
They
Dragon
went
Age,
all out on lore.
Dragon Age
Oh,
2
yeah, for sure.
came out and was like, we made an action RPG,
Yeah.
and then everybody hated it.
Yeah.
And then
Because
I
it was
remember
garbage.
Kingdoms of Amalur coming out and people being like, this is what Dragon Age 2 should have been.
Yeah.
It was like Fable mashed up with a Dragon Age
Yeah,
game.
that's actually a good thing. I was trying to
Yeah.
think of another game. It felt like Fable's
it felt,
definitely
the
good.
combat
yeah.
felt a lot
Combat
like
definitely
like
felt Fable,
kind of like Dark Souls 2 maybe.
Yeah, I mentioned the Dark Souls thing because you had a roll and a parry, I believe, and that
Yeah.
kind of felt a little bit Dark Soulsy, like the way you could parry. But enemies weren't like it wasn't like a like an animations game like Dark Souls. You know what I mean?
Right,
like,
right.
Where once you did something, you're locked into that fucking frame until
No, it
whether
was
good or
very
not.
much like Dragon Age,
Yeah,
where
exactly.
you like
Yeah.
you just like did damage and numbers popped out of people.
Okay.
Make those
so
numbers
so
get
it's
higher.
funny, like the way this got revealed and like there was a lot of actually talk about this game from the start. So they announced it at the 2010 San Diego Comic-Con, and I believe they showed it off publicly there. And you had Todd McFarlane heading the art, Kirk Hope doing the music, Ari Salvador. I mentioned, like you were talking about the lore. He created
Precisely.
over 10,000 years of backstory.
Well,
for
think
this
about it.
thing.
He's been writing since fucking Curt Schilling was having Thanksgiving dinner and
Yeah,
thought about the
it's in,
idea.
like,
You know what I mean?
05.
So,
And so Kurt himself was going around saying that the game was meant to be a marriage of the action of God of War and the world building and narrative of Oblivion, which I don't know how
so
descriptive that ended up being in the end.
Pretty on
two
point.
games you've heard of. Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty on point. Actually.
Okay, I didn't know if the combat was that arcadey.
Maybe
but
he does.
Not really, but-
maybe he does know about video games. Maybe I'm looking at
he
him all
name
wrong.
dropped 2 of them.
Yeah.
You guys ever heard of Halo?
So people were paying attention, after this got revealed, except me, because I mentioned earlier that my only real impressions of the game came from a demo, and the demo came out less than a month before the game went gold, and the demo Curt himself famously hated because they thought that they released the demo too early and it was super buggy, and he was like, this never should have come out.
Which, once again, as the owner of the company, maybe you should have tried the demo before you released it. Just saying.
So
sometimes he's got to hit one out there into the outfield and just trust that it'll be a home run. Yeah. And they're like, that's not how games work.
No, you have a bunch of these engineers just looking down and just
Yeah.
Sure. They like a lot of game development, there was a few weeks of some serious crunching that went down to basically fix it and everything. So the game officially released on February 7th of 2012, and it came out on 360, PS3, and then Origin on the Windows. I think it was exclusive to the Origin store on Windows.
Yeah,
that was after.
That
was
on
after.
360.
So did I.
Did Origin came out with Battlefield 3? I think.
Yes.
Right? That was maybe that was the first game that you exclusively needed to play.
That was after the whole "we're not doing Steam anymore" thing.
Which Battlefield 3 on PC was a nightmare with the you play. It was by a browser.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was called Battlelog, and it was it was like a Facebook.
Well, Battlelog is what they renamed the
really?
Xbox app or whatever app they run through all the games.
At the time, people thought that was going to be cool, and it looked like Facebook. It was like a Battlefield Facebook, and you could oorah people's statuses rather than like them.
This is so painful.
It's so bad. It's amazing.
How are you feeling?
Hoorah.
Engineer kills tank.
But they made an event out of the launch of this thing back when that was a thing. Games when they launch now, they're more meant to be platforms. They don't launch events anymore. Yeah. The last time I can think of a game that came out that was a launch event was maybe GTA 5. But you think in the era where games like Halo 3 and stuff like that, the world would stop and kids would fucking fake being sick from school to play games.
Oh, I borderline dropped out of school.
Yeah. It was they made a big deal. But they had this whole streaming event, right? And it was I think it was hosted by Day 9, and Felicia Day was doing interviews with the crew and stuff like that. And other than the online pass thing, which was total bullshit, but that was that's EA's thing, that wasn't 38 Studios thing. They
wait, EA? You're telling me EA put their fingers in something?
Yeah,
no.
It was weird. Which I think it took maybe a year or two for them to get rid of that stuff completely. But out of the gate, this game started reviewing really well. IGN gave the game a 9. It got 8s from Game Informer. Giant Bomb gave it a 4 out of 5. And there was a couple perfect scores. There was some middling ones, but overall it was a really promising debut. People were paying attention to the studio now. And definitely not bad for a game that was meant to... the whole purpose of this game was to fund the real one.
Yeah. Honestly, I would tend to agree with that. I don't remember a whole lot. I know I played it for several hours. Mm-hmm. But I don't have a sour memory about it. I remember enjoying it. We talked
I remember people liking the customization.
I liked that game a whole lot.
The customization was awesome. The combat was fun. I liked the idea that, we were talking earlier, you had the fate system. You could respec your character. If you were fuck, I didn't want to be a rogue, you could, totally, pay to respec all your skills, and now you're a mage, or now you're, fighter bound.
So here's the bummer, though. So within the first month, it was projected by the NPD that the game sold about 330,000 copies, physical copies.
All right, so do some math. Is that 75 million? Are they breaking even?
It is not. Curt later tweeted, I think this was maybe within the first 90 days that it sold 1.2 million.
Okay.
Which isn't awful. I think lifetime sales, they said it was around 1.5 million. But obviously that was not the number
Just
that
short of
the
75.
governor was looking for.
Yeah.
Which they had a new governor at this point. It was a dude named Lincoln Chaffee, and he called the game a total failure.
Yeah,
he came in.
Is
to
it
this
because
new
he
one.
looked at it as an objective financial
Well,
investment?
I'm sure he
instead
came in.
of,
He came in to being governor, and he's like, "What the fuck is this that
Like,
was in place?"
Okay, so to put this into perspective, I
Yeah.
got some numbers here.
Okay.
So for a new IP, 1.5 million lifetime is not that bad.
No, yeah.
And let's go.
By the way, hold on. The one thing I will say is that the game apparently needed to sell 3 million to break
Okay,
even.
that's important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Top. Okay, so these are some older games, but we're looking at the top new IP sales figures.
Okay. I'm curious.
So let's go through. Saints Row 1 sold 2 million copies.
That's pretty well, yeah, because that came out within the launch year of the 360.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. I think Dead Rising was around the same.
Some other big name games: Devil May Cry 2.1 million, BioShock
That's good.
2.2 million,
BioShock.
Animal Crossing 2.3 million, God of
is
War
that the GameCube
2.3
one?
million. Yeah,
Or
these are
N64
the
one?
first entry of every
Okay.
series.
Yeah.
Perfect Dark 2.5 million,
Yep.
Ratchet and
Did the
Clank
gold
2.5
mine.
million, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2.5 million,
Fucking A.
Resident Evil 2.75 million, Fable 3 million.
Nice.
Sonic the Hedgehog 4 million, Star Fox 4 million.
These are the
So
first. Yeah.
so this game is kind of hanging.
Yeah,
there.
Gears of War 4.7 million, Halo 5 million,
Yeah.
Assassin's Creed 5 million. I'm
That's
naming
up,
a bunch
that's
of
up there, but yeah.
I know. I'm naming the biggest franchises in gaming
Yeah,
that are
yeah.
now worth over $1 billion.
This
and
game
they're older,
could have been there. Like,
but
Yeah.
it's like Chris was saying. This is not. He's like, wait a minute, you're telling me I didn't make my $75 million back? And it's like, well, that's not exactly how it
You
works.
told me
Yeah.
if I gave you $75 million, you would give me a game that would make $100 million.
sell 75 million copies.
In no time, we'll be back to
Yeah.
$1 billion.
So-
Next thing you know, Rhode Island is we got a spaceport and we're making money.
Yeah,
It's
like-
it's got a space for it.
like you got to look at it as an investment. So they
Yeah.
now had people interested in this lore, and if that MMO had ever come out, that could have been
Yeah.
something.
Well, here's
Yeah.
the thing. This
it's
game
almost
was
like
getting.
they created a creative property
Well, here's the thing.
instead of $1 billion
You're right.
tech
This
company.
game was getting supported by DLC still. Like, despite the sales coming out or whatever, like they published quite like a bit of downloadable content for this thing. And meanwhile, like development was still a go on Copernicus.
Yeah.
So like they like
the game that they were originally supposed to make.
A game
the
that they were
whole
supposed to make
reason
in the
this story
beginning.
started to begin with.
Yeah. But so unhappy with the sales of the game, obviously, the state of Rhode Island, which at this point already being like super strained by finances, became like
That's what you get when you divert all your clam farming money to a tech company.
they became concerned, obviously, over 38 Studios' finances, and the company defaulted on a $1.125 million loan payment, which basically meaning that they sent a check that bounced.
the state of Rhode
to the state of Rhode Island with insufficient funds. So Keith Stokes, he was
Yeah,
the,
so picture
the
this, I go to
executive
Wawa
director of
to-
Rhode Island EDC. he resigned
Yeah,
like right after
immediately.
that. Yeah, he's just like
Yeah, he did the equivalent of going to Wawa and he was trying to buy a sandwich and he swiped his card and it was like declined. He's like, all right, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah, the sandwich is made. He
He walked
walked. He
away.
walked out. The second payment by the studio was attempted. Like this was 17 days past the initial due date,
And this
In
is
the
like a
form-
month later, or I don't know, who knows how.
So
long
this was in the
later.
form of a wild chancellor and a personal check who was from an unnamed source. I have not been able to find who signed the check, and which is hilarious. The payment was successful.
Okay.
But this was because the 38 Studios cut payroll. Like all these dudes that are still working on Copernicus and DLC for Kings of Amalur just suddenly weren't paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, I'm assuming whoever's in charge or whoever wants. Somebody took a bold move right now and signed their name on a check that they took money from the employees' fucking payments, and then just wrote that check. We're like, we
And the
gotta pay
employees
it.
didn't find out
Okay.
until now.
Yes.
Yeah.
So little insight into this is from a Kotaku article I found on the subject. It is an account from an anonymous employee of the timeline of this.
Okay.
So you said that payment bounced. The first payment was when? Do you know?
It says The second payment was made May 18th, which was 17 days past the initial due.
So okay.
So it was the beginning of that month. It was
Employees were
of 2012.
Employees were paid on April 30th of 2012.
Okay.
Employees of both Big Huge Games and 38. So as paychecks go every 2 weeks, May 15th came around, nobody got paid.
Not even my boy Kirk.
May 18th rolled around. That payment was made to the state of Rhode Island, and the check cleared.
And it cleared this time.
Mysteriously.
Yeah.
On the 20th, some people were hearing some things about medical insurance not exactly working. On May 22nd, an employee's pregnant wife was rushed to the hospital, and her insurance was declined.
Yes, what a way to find out that some company you work for used your fucking insurance money to pay for a check that they couldn't clear.
All the while,
Amazing.
all the while this is going on, employees are obviously walking around the office being like, "Yo, what the fuck's happened? Did you get paid?" And they're like, "No, I didn't get
I
paid.
didn't either."
I
My
guess
wife got turned out at the fucking hospital. What's going on?" All
Guess I'll still
the
keep
fucking
making this
executives
DLC.
are not answering emails, not
Hey,
answering calls, closing
Donnie,
their-
what's the deal? Shilling won't answer me. Sometimes you strike out. Sometimes, you know what I mean? Stop with the baseball references.
So, and I'll let you get to the closure, but none of the employees found out that they were in any trouble or out of a job officially until an email was sent to employees about the closure of the company.
So,
And they were laid off
Man.
effective that fucking day.
So wait,
That's amazing.
Yeah, so the company just
Jesus.
closed after they couldn't make this payment. Then they made a payment, and then the next thing they know is
They made a payment.
Yeah.
The employees kept working, and they kept making them work.
Yeah.
And telling them that their paychecks were going to come, and then they just closed the whole company and didn't give them a paycheck, cut off their insurance, gave them no notice to find new jobs, and they never paid them for the month of May.
for the month of May,
And a bunch of
Yeah.
these employees relocated. for
Yeah.
that
Also,
job.
one of them had a fucking child and required that to be kept
Also-
alive.
Well, imagine if you find out that the mortgage on your house wasn't getting paid.
Bold
Yeah.
statement:
Yeah.
Curt Schilling killed a baby.
I'm sure there were a lot of people who had a bunch of mortgage troubles too, because if the company
Yes,
was
Yeah.
covering
mortgage troubles.
mortgages-
A baby did not get its proper medical care
Yeah.
because a fucking
I'm
baseball
sure they
player
delivered the
wanted to make
baby
an
and then,
MMO. You know what I mean? Like, are you kidding me?
Listen, he liked World of Warcraft. It was,
Yeah, I wish I liked World of Warcraft enough to
That
kill
much?
a baby. I'm sorry.
What about to make a bunch of people homeless?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So the WPRI News reported that both the CEO and the senior vice president of production development had jumped ship and left the company.
Duh, because when you got a bunch of money and you don't have a new baby to raise, you can just fucking
here's the crazy
split.
thing: they bounced in March. So like,
It's months before
Yeah,
all
it was
this
months
happened.
before. So like, employees didn't know that the CEO fucking left. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
What, I mean, picture
Also-
that. Yeah.
And
I
this, mind you, this is all a month after Kingdom of Amalur came
I
out.
want to point out
Like-
here too that when we were talking about MMO budgets earlier, WoW was in development for a very long time,
Yeah.
as was games like Destiny and the Old Republic, and so that $200 million that the Old Republic cost was spent over a course of probably like 6 years. I don't know
And
how long
what's
it was in
this,
development.
Not even 5? Like,
That $75 million loan by the state of Rhode Island was signed in July of 2010, and the
Yeah.
studio
2 years,
shut down
yeah. Fucking 2
in May of
years.
2012. So it was
Not
they
even
spent
2 years.
$75 million in and probably more. They probably had other money spent in the company,
well,
not
as
just
we're gonna
that loan.
find out, Curt Schilling ended up using a lot of his own money
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah.
So,
So
they probably
that
spent
actually gets
$100
really
million
interesting.
in less than 2 fucking years.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, nobody was checking up on this company.
Yeah.
They were just
spending
blasting their
money. I mean, what does everybody's desk need a baseball signed by Curt Schilling? No, and I'm sure they all had it.
That's a good retirement.
It's all
That's
held
a
up
good
with
retirement
bats.
plan. though.
And so like
Yeah.
so
hey, why is my desk got bats for legs? Oh, we spent $75 million on the pitching machine earlier, so we put it in the studio. Sorry.
I imagine that's what the coffee maker looks like. So officially on May 24th of 2012, 38 studios officially declared bankruptcy. Ceasing all operations, laying off his entire staff, like Austin said, through that email. And soon
And now
after...
you're just stranded in Rhode Island,
Yeah,
and there's
so
barely any clams already because the unemployment rate was
this
super
statement
low.
comes out, and soon after, the Rhode Island State Police, the Attorney General's office, and the U.S. Attorney's office, and the FBI all launch an investigation into the company.
Yeah,
Like all like this is like all like mind you, this game has been out for a month, and it's still on store shelves. Like and
I want to point out a little story I found too online. So we were wrong. Kingdoms of Amalur was on Steam.
Okay.
Was it really?
Yes.
Okay.
This article is.
Did it come out on Steam later?
Maybe.
Okay.
This article is written June 5th of 2013. So about a year after all this shit went down.
Right.
Rhode Island net about $1 million in sales since acquiring the Amalur IP through legal means. So less than a year after Rhode Island investigated and sued the shit out of 38 and got the IP for Kingdoms of Amalur, they're still paying off this debt, but they're using it through your Steam sales and of Kingdoms of Amalur.
That's so good. I assume that game is still for sale on
So
Steam.
as of July, it says they acquired about $750,000 in sales just through Steam.
Yeah.
I
mean, the word of mouth was that this game was good. Like it was.
Honestly, I would tell you it was good.
Yeah. So it was like at this moment though, the developer they were 153 million in debt.
Yeah, and also I just want to point out this. They say that the FBI was investigating, and that sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
But trust me, it was literally one guy who fucked up a case.
Sent over
and it's
there.
like, your job, somebody there's $75 million is getting fucked around with. Just take a look. You know what I mean? So
Like who got stuck with that job?
yeah, exactly.
Because the rest of everybody else
regardless,
is investigating aliens.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Duh.
So Schilling himself did not publicly address the debacle and failure of the studio until he had an appearance on a Boston radio station, WEI, and he revealed that he never took a salary, which later turned out to not be true. He was making $86,000 a year, which for starting a game company is maybe not the biggest thing ever, but I don't know why he would lie about that.
First of all, it's nice. Okay. Oh, sorry, you were making $86,000 a year after you made bank playing baseball for the last 20.
And I don't know what he did at as a position.
I'll tell you what he did. He walked among the computers of the programmers and made fucking, hey, you making this game? Oh, hey, let's make sure I can play it. That's the whole reason he made it in the first place, was the fact that he wanted to play a fucking MMO that he created.
Yeah,
you know?
And it was definitely an ego thing. So he lost his entire personal fortune of about $50 million, which came from his retirement in the MLB. And he went on this radio station saying that he was tapped out. He put everything in his name into the company. This is his words. And he said he was not asking for sympathy. He said this was my choice. And then shortly after, he sold a bunch of his his personal belongings that were apparently held a lot of weird value in the baseball community, including this trademark bloody sock.
He sold his bloody sock.
He sold his bloody sock, which there were some investigations around the sock that I thought that were funny, but I don't know much about the sock itself.
Well, the idea is that he was pitching a game. I think it was in the World Series. I believe it was.
Yeah.
And he had a fucked up tendon. So basically, the team doctor rudimentarily sewed his tendon back in. It'll work, just do it. Apparently he tested the procedure on a cadaver because it was some epically barbaric
that sounds
procedure.
It sounds ballsy.
Yeah, it does. It was some shit that they would do on a battlefield in fucking Game of Thrones. He literally sewed his tendon back in and then put him on the field to pitch the game, and he pitched the whole game, and he did good. He came out swinging, and Boston ended up going through.
And this was a baseball artifact. I don't know how much he sold it for, but it was a lot.
Because apparently
the
blood was from the stitches rubbing against his tendon, so it bled. So it came through the back of his sock. So his sock was just covered in blood,
which was weird.
And people were out there seeing is this guy all right?
People thought he faked it. I think there was investigation when he sold the sock that people were is this fake blood? And it wasn't, but it was real blood. But here's if he wasn't such a cock about so much social and political issues, then you'd probably feel really. I know. Yeah. You'd probably feel really bad for him. He genuinely was a fan of games and wanted to start a game company. It's just he was kind of an asshole. This dude was going around constantly spouting against gay marriage and stuff like that. And which would kind of goes against EA's even ideologies. But he at this point all these lawsuits were in like full force.
Yeah. Everybody was trying to get their money back.
Yeah, everybody wanted their money, and it makes perfect sense. Like, at this point, the EDC, which they were now called the Rhode Island's Commerce Corporation at this point, they engaged with a law firm, which I love the name of this law firm.
Oh, you mean they restructured? I wonder why. Is it because they gave $75 million to a fucking baseball player?
Get it. This law firm is named Wistow, Sheehan, and Lovely.
Wow.
That's amazing. Like, I don't know. I think that name is incredible.
We all got different names. Let's make a law firm. It'll sound great.
They came in to file suit against Schilling, Stokes, and a bunch of the financial backers and advisors of 38 Studios.
Yeah. Didn't Rhode Island sue, what is it, not Wachovia or some big bank?
I think it was Wells Fargo.
Wells Fargo. Yeah, I knew it was a W.
Yeah.
Came in and sued them because Wells Fargo was also just like, whatever, you're rich. Do we want?
Nobody investigated.
Also,
this
by
shit.
the way, everybody's Italian apparently.
In the state of Rhode Island. So this is in November of 2012. So this is the same year. This game hasn't even been out for a full year. At this point, I think the DLC has stopped, but that DLC went on for like longer than you think it would be. But so this was like 2 years of investigating. In May of 2014. Or I guess it's like a year and a half. The WPRI reports that the studio execs knew that the money that they accepted from the state would have never been enough to finish Copernicus to help pay back the loan.
Yeah,
which
of
fucking
course not.
obviously,
anybody with a sane fucking mind could tell you.
Yeah.
From the beginning.
Yeah,
there's no way you're
never
making
worked from the
2
start.
games on $75 million to begin
Never.
with.
Yeah.
$75 million is barely enough to start the studio.
Yeah.
Without making it.
Yeah.
And Kingdoms of
exactly.
Amalur was like had production value. Like
Yeah.
that
It
game,
did.
that was not a small game by any means, despite the fact that it was a scaled down version of an MMO.
Yeah.
Like a month later, this is in June of 2014, the state's economic development agency settled for $4.4 million, and then there was another settlement a couple months later, or no, this is a little over a year later in August of 2015 for $12.5 million. Wells Fargo and Barclays Capital another year later settled for $25.5 million. And then Curt himself, along with the former CEO, Jen McLean, and a couple others that were, I guess, like higher ups of that company, settled for around $2.5 million, and that's in their personal damages.
That's where that bloody sock money went.
Yeah, and and then finally Hilltop Securities Inc. This ended last February. This is February of 2017. So for $16 million. And at this point, the total is around $61 million in damages. Despite the fact that the state police could not come up with enough sufficient evidence to properly file like real criminal charges against 38, because none of it was done in bad faith. They were just dumb.
Yeah,
like
well,
it's like
they weren't criminals. They were just idiots.
Yeah, and they still ended up losing $14 million in the whole fucking endeavor to period, regardless of what they made back.
And that's taxpayer money.
Yeah.
Like during this time, the SEC got word that the WPRI reported and charged both the Rhode Island Commerce Corporation and Wells Fargo with securities fraud.
Yeah. No shit. Yeah, absolutely. Deserved.
Specifically noting that the two companies were completely fucking aware that the $75 million loan, like you guys have been saying, was not enough to make two games, let alone one MMO.
It would take one guy and one computer to figure out that wasn't enough to make that game 20 fucking minutes. Yet nobody knew for 5 years.
And this is people who don't know jack dick about games.
Yeah, exactly. People with no idea about a game.
But they failed to notify any bond investors of the risk, which is like where all this stuff came in. So
because
this led
this is
to
all fast talking, smooth fucking rich guys hey, we're gonna make Microsoft money. Are you ready? Yeah,
Bill Gates rich.
Yeah.
So this led to a civil penalty by settlement, along with a couple other additional fines to really close things out amongst all the finger pointing. Because at this point, this was like, if you were to talk to any of these higher ups, they were just constantly like, like nobody really knew what they were doing.
Yeah.
So this is kind of be our closer here. But where does this leave our massive Kingdoms of Amalur universe? Yeah. According to a report by Bloomberg, the state at one point attempted to sell all remaining assets in order to provide the proceeds to the remaining balance on the loan.
Yeah. Well, of course.
Exactly. And apparently both parties claimed that they needed to take action immediately because, quote, if the trustee appointed to dismantle the game maker received permission to abandon computer equipment, all of the intellectual property could be irretrievably lost. The property alone was said to make up the vast majority of 38 Studios' value at this point.
Yeah. That's the only thing they ever did besides fuck off.
Exactly. But here's the thing. IGN at one point reported that that Take-Two of GTA actually showed interest in like their public, like they showed interest in buying the rights to the property.
Yeah.
But that never happened. And so a sequel was never made, and Rhode Island remained in control of all of 38 assets and games, including Kingdoms of Amalur: Reckoning and the never-seen released Copernicus.
Which they still own, and as Austin pointed out earlier, are still making money off of every time you buy it on Steam.
Which is crazy. Yeah, like that. Like I didn't think about that until you mentioned it. Like that game is still actively for sale. Because unlike the Epic Games controversy with Dennis Dyack,
somebody is making money off of Kingdoms of Amalur in Rhode Island if you buy it on
so
Steam right now.
So go buy it now on your 360.
Yeah, I'm trying to load my Steam, which of course needs an update every time it.
How much does that game cost now?
Yeah, I'm trying to look it up.
$20 on Steam.
So buy it right now and give the state of Rhode Island $20
to put towards the
little timeline. I'm trying to piece this together, but from what I can tell, it amounted to about $150 million total.
Okay,
that everybody was on the hook for, mostly the state of Rhode Island. As of that story I told you about in 2013, when they were still making money off the game on Steam.
Yeah.
The loan had been cut down to about a little over $100 million in debt through selling off computers and office furniture, which raised them about $500,000.
Is that worth as much as Kurt Cope's music or Ari Salvador's writing or Todd McFarlane's art?
Yeah, of course not.
So, and then I have an Ars Technica story from 2016 when all those lawsuits you were talking about went through.
Right, yeah.
So which cut their loan down to about $75 million. But this last reported that the state of Rhode Island still owes about $75 million, which was the original loan. And the Rhode Island taxpayers are on the hook for about $28.2 million of that.
Jeez.
Oh my God. So basically, just to sum it up, the baseball player Curt Schilling, which, might I add, ended up fucking doing radio politics on some Saturday morning bullshit show, and now writes for fucking Breitbart.
Yeah, which I did not know until you told me, and I was just like, wow.
He fucking writes for Breitbart. Oh, are you surprised that a long-jawed white dude who used to play sports writes for fucking Breitbart now? The point is, this guy decided to make a game, and now the citizens of Rhode Island are $28 million on the hook on their taxes. You tell me every clam, how much does a clam cost? Let's say a clam is $1.
Single clam.
They have to pay a small percentage of every clam they pull out of the water and give it to Curt Schilling. Or no, sorry. Give it to Rhode Island because of Curt Schilling.
So obviously he comes off in the story as just completely an arrogant and over-exuberant entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Completely possessed of grand illusions, of something he does not understand.
Yeah.
And the political establishment of Rhode Island forever learned that maybe it's not a good idea for taxpayers to capitalize a gaming company that's never actually produced a video game before.
Yeah.
Because as far as I know, and we were talking about this a little before we started, is like I don't think that this has ever happened again.
It's like I said, people give tax breaks.
Yeah.
So you get rich investors to build the company, and then once the company's built, you charge them less in taxes so that they can do what they do better.
Yeah.
And then they can bring in talent, and eventually their taxes get larger, and even with the breaks, you make money off of them, and you make money off taxes for the employees and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. But you don't fund the game they're making.
Yeah, he opposes...
I think the saddest state of affairs of this whole thing is that they actually ended up making a good game out of it. Like, if Kingdoms of Amalur was bad, then it would have just been like, man, fuck these wankers. But...
Yeah, I was looking at Curt Schilling also has a great ALS organization. Yeah, it's a shame he couldn't do an ice bucket challenge for funding Copernicus.
Oh my God! How many buckets of ice does it take to fund a MMO of that size?
More than 75 million. I tell you that much. Well, all right. Is that it?
I think that's it.
Did it?
Yeah, that is that story.
Fuck yeah! Fucking story, guys. Hell yeah.
Yeah. So the at this point the book is closed on our boy Curt and his weird company.
And the state of Rhode Island is still less than 50% or more than 50% of the way. Or no, less
Getting
than,
it back.
Less than 50% of the way.
So everybody
of
go
their
buy
mistake.
your copies of Kingdoms of Amalur now and help pay back the loan. And then at that point, maybe we'll look into funding some more video games.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fucking A.
We'll be back again with another weird topic and
Yeah, for
find
sure.
something fun.
I'll leave out following us on anything until we get another episode down. But
Yeah.
if you're that interested in the first episode of a show, which you're probably going back to listen to after listening to the most recent, I guess you can follow us on all
Mention that
sorts of
Twitter,
shit.
yeah.
On Twitter, what did I make it? Hot Button Cast? Yeah, Hot Button Cast. Because Hot
good.
Button Podcast or Hot Button Pod is already taken by a radio show in Washington State, which hasn't been
Fuck them.
around since 2015 or anything. Like, yeah,
Are they funded by the state?
it was from the school. It was from the school, and it was awful.
That sounds like some
looked into
shady
it.
shit
Yeah,
to
we
me.
definitely have more claim over here than they ever will.
I'll drive over there.
Yeah, so yeah, follow us on there on Hot Button Cast, and you
Fuck
guys
yeah.
have
Thank you
Twitters.
for
You want a
listening.
promo? I don't know if you're interested. I'm
Yeah.
Chris I something. You can follow me. I make
You
occasional
can't spell it.
jokes
It's
down
fine.
there. All right.
Yes. All right. Take care. Hey guys, Randall here. Just a quick little note. First of all, we just want to thank you guys so much again for listening to our first episode. It really does mean a lot to us. Please let us know how we did. I love feedback on this kind of stuff. Now, secondly, I do want to address the recent changes regarding Amalur. See, when we recorded this pilot, it certainly seemed like it was safe to say that it was kind of the end of the road for 38 Studios and its whole fantasy franchise. Or at least it was until apparently as of September 6, 2018, news was officially put out that one THQ Nordic, not to be confused with former video game publisher THQ, just to make this entire thing even more fucking confusing, had acquired the Kings of Amalur IP, including the abandoned Copernicus MMO project, from 38 Studios. Now, while there's no official info at the time of this reading on what they actually plan to do with it, I can confirm that the $900 and $1,000 deal has been finalized, brokered from a company in Vienna, which is just crazy. And the one other tricky thing I also want to say is that, according to many sources, it was reported that original publisher of Amalur, Electronic Arts, does still retain the rights to the property, with the purchaser, THQ Nordic, officially stating, "At this stage, we only acquired the intellectual property," said a representative. Given our track record, we know what the burning questions are: remaster, remake, port to next generation systems, etc. But we decided not to answer those specifically, as we tend to put our heads together first and do our homework, and we can only start to talk about everything once we feel confident and very familiar with the franchise. Now, the company THQ Nordic, formerly known as just Nordic Games before later being rebranded with the THQ name in front of it after their own bankruptcy years prior, has been fairly prolific in publicly buying some pretty cut-loose IPs and trademarks: Dead Island, Metro, recently Time Splitters, Saints Row, Homefront, Red Faction, Darksiders, all now theirs. The list goes on and on. What's especially funny, too, is that the last four properties that I named there were all initially under the original THQ's banner as well. So yeah, the story kind of took on a new ending of its own afterwards. And right after we wrapped up our whole investigation, too. Still not exactly sure what conversations had to happen for them to even get everything away from the state of Rhode Island itself. I mean, as if they even wanted it anymore. Or hell, they could still be connected to it in some way. We may never know. But all we do know now is that the Kingdoms franchise may not be totally dead after all, which is, I guess, what Curt would have wanted, right? So yes, I think that's where our engagement with the story ends, as any follow-up after this is just the games industry being the game industry. But, I only start paying attention once the FBI gets involved. But thanks again, everyone. If anything like this happens again before an episode airs, we'll do our best to try and fix it. I mean, we're only human after all, but all jokes aside, I really do want the investigative journalism on the show to mean something. Staying true to the topic is kind of part of the job. Now I know how Robert Graysmith must have felt once new evidence came out in the Zodiac case after he published his book. But I think that's it for today. So, all right, go live your days.